Hello folks, my name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? So, Charlie Kirk has been shot and killed. That's certainly something that I was not expecting to happen today. Pretty freaking crazy. So, whatever you think of Charlie Kirk, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that people who watch my videos were not the biggest fans of the man. I think we can all safely condemn political violence. It's never a good thing when someone is shot and killed, especially when it comes to political figures. But to say that Charlie Kirk wasn't a divisive figure would just not be true, because he certainly was. He was not the nicest person. He did not spend his time spreading the nicest message out there, especially when it came to people that he disagreed with politically. Charlie Kirk was a very, very, very divisive figure. That's just the truth. What I'm seeing online now, especially when it comes from a lot of Republican pundits, a lot of MAGA people, stuff like that, is that there's a lot of outrage over the man's death. And more specifically, they're trying to pin this on Democrats. If you go and look at the statement that Donald Trump made, people like Nancy Mace, things like that, Laura Loomer, they're not blaming political violence here on a maniac with a gun, which is what they would be doing if this was any other type of mass shooting. They would be blaming that on, like, mental illness or something. No, they're blaming it specifically on Democrats. They're using this man's death as a opportunity to spread hate and fear about Democrats specifically. Because if you haven't noticed in the news lately, the last couple of weeks, Donald Trump and his ilk have been trying to spread fear about Democrats because I'm not exactly sure why. There's a lot of suspicion that they're doing it because they want to declare the Democratic Party a terrorist organization and basically steal the election in 2 years and make Donald Trump a dictator. That's the speculation out there. It doesn't matter what the reason is. This is what they're doing. They have been doing it for the last couple of weeks. That is implying that Democrats are terrorists and that the Democratic Party is a terrorist organization. And they're just kind of exploiting Charlie Kirk's death along those lines. So it's actually quite despicable and disgusting. And I kind of think in a lot of ways the outrage is fake, especially when it comes from politicians. Like, there's video right now of Glenn Beck and Megyn Kelly floating around online where they find out Charlie Kirk has been killed in real time and they're like crying, And I actually kind of believe that their emotion is genuine because they probably worked with Charlie Kirk a lot. And regardless of what you think of Charlie Kirk, he was an actual real person who had real friends and, colleagues or whatever, and they probably genuinely liked him. Somebody like Laura Loomer, I doubt Laura Loomer gave two shits about Charlie Kirk at all. And I think she's just spreading hate and fear and using it as an example to get views on her tweets. For example, I've got this tweet here from Laura Loomer. Charlie Kirk's death will not be in vain. I will be spending my night making everyone I find online who celebrates his death famous, so prepare to have your whole future professional aspirations ruined if you are sick enough to celebrate his death. I'm going to make you wish you never opened your mouth. These people need to be condemned in society, and there must never be a place for those to gather without facing the shame of their behavior. I do like this first reaction to Laura Loomer, the very first person who tweeted back, "Eat a dick, bitch." And then they showed a screenshot of how she reacted to the anniversary of George Floyd's death. One thing we gotta remember, folks, don't allow the right wing in this country control your speech. Don't let them dictate what you are and aren't allowed to say. That's complete, total fucking bullshit. Don't be afraid. Stand up for yourself. Because that's what they're doing. They're taking the death of this guy, Kirk, taking what should be a tragedy, and they're exploiting it for political gain. That's exactly what Laura Loomer's doing. That's exactly what every other far-right pundit online is doing right now. That's exactly what Donald Trump is doing himself. Within 90 minutes of Charlie Kirk's shooting, Donald Trump called the governor of Utah to discuss what happened and, all of that stuff. If you remember back in June when a right-wing Republican lunatic went around and started shooting Democratic lawmakers, Donald Trump didn't even take the time out of his day to call Governor Tim Walz and talk about the deaths of 2 Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota. And I don't know if you remember that, okay? Her name was State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband. She was shot and killed, and her husband was killed by a Republican lunatic who dressed up as a police officer, went to her house, knocked on her door, shot her and her husband dead, then went to another house of a Democratic lawmaker the same night and shot him and his wife, and didn't kill the second person. But that's what happened. This happened in June. Donald Trump didn't even bother to call Tim Walz when that happened. We actually have a news story of that. That wasn't just that's not just a rumor or a conspiracy theory. This is an actual article from ABC News. Trump says calling Walz after Minnesota shootings would be waste of time. I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out, Trump said. Let's play the video. It's only 29 seconds long.
There were a lot of horrific details that came out today about the suspect who's been charged there. Have you called the governor yet or been able to speak to any of them?
I don't really call him. He appointed this guy to a position. I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out. I'm not calling him. Why would I call him? I could call him and say, hi, how you doing? The guy doesn't have a clue. He's a mess. So, I could be nice and call him, but why waste time?
Why waste time? That's Donald Trump's opinion when a insane Republican goes and shoots 2 people. When someone does the same to one of his friends, not only does he call the governor, he gets in front of the entire nation and makes a statement. Here's a part of Donald Trump's statement of what he said about the death of Charlie Kirk.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges.
So just compare those reactions, folks. Compare the reaction of what Donald Trump said when Melissa Hortman was murdered and what he just said when Charlie Kirk was murdered. Seems like he cares about one group of people a little bit more than another group of people. Seems like Donald Trump doesn't give a flying fuck when somebody who is on the opposite side of him politically gets blown away. Kind of seems like Donald Trump is using this tragedy in order to further his own political gains. That's kind of what it looks like to me. I would like you to find for me any lawmaker on the Democratic side, anyone, anywhere, who is celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. Find me somebody. Find me a senator, find me a representative, find me a mayor or a governor. Find me anyone. Find me a news anchor that is celebrating the fact that Charlie Kirk is dead. Find me them. I'm sure you can find plenty of, just random wackaloons online who may be saying things about Charlie Kirk's death. No, but find me a politician. Find me a pundit. Find me anyone who is reacting to Charlie Kirk's death the same way that Laura Loomer or Donald Trump reacted to the death of Melissa Hortman. You can't, and you won't be able to. You know why? because liberals and Democrats and leftists are decent people, and they wouldn't exploit this kind of tragedy for their own political gain, not like the Republicans are doing right now. Because one thing you got to remember is that Republicans and conservatives and MAGA people are the worst fucking people who have ever lived. They will lie about everything, including the death of one of their own, in order to spread hate and fear and exploit it politically, which is exactly what's going on right now. We don't know who shot Charlie Kirk, yet they're going around blaming it on Democrats, specifically on Democrats. Here's a video right here. This is Nancy Mace. Let's see what Nancy Mace's reaction to Charlie Kirk's death is when she tries to blame Democrats for it. And then the reporter actually does something interesting. He pushes back and says, well, hey, do Republicans own the deaths of Melissa Hordman? And let's see her reaction.
I'm going to say this. Democrats own what happened today. I am devastated. My kids have called panicking. All the kids of every conservative in the country called panicking. Just because you speak your mind on an issue doesn't mean you get shot.
Then, by that logic, do Republicans own the shooting of the 2 Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota? Isn't this on both sides?
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm asking
We
a
don't
serious
know what
question.
condition Charlie Kirk is in right now. Some raging leftist lunatic put a bullet through his neck, and you want to talk about Republicans right now? No.
No, I'm asking
no, not
you.
at all.
You said the Democrats have to own it too. But I'm asking,
Democrats own this.
But isn't there a problem with political violence across the spectrum?
Yeah, we're talking about Charlie Kirk right now. That's the subject of this that we're talking about right now.
Say that, folks? Oh, so it's okay. It's okay for her to tie this shooting to Democrats, but when a crazy Republican person dresses up like a police officer and then goes and murders 2 Democratic lawmakers, oh no, that's out of line. Oh, Republicans had nothing to do with that. Oh no, we're talking about Charlie Kirk here. We're not talking about, Republicans. So when one of their own gets murdered, oh no, it's all the Democrats' fault. But when one of their own does it to a Democrat, oh, we had nothing to do with that. Get the fuck out of here. All right. This is what we're seeing. And the thing is, this is what always fucking happens. Okay. Every single time a Republican or a conservative does something insane or crazy or wrong or illegal, the conservatives and Republicans isolate that person and go, oh yeah, we had nothing to do with that guy. That guy doesn't represent us whatsoever. But whenever someone even slightly to the left of center does the same, it's the entire leftist community and the entire Democratic Party, which are not even the same fucking things. It's all of our faults. And that's how I know that her reaction is bullshit. Do you really think, Nancy Mace's children called her? Of course they fucking didn't. Nancy Mace's children didn't call her and be like, Charlie Kirk's dead. No, get the fuck out of here. It's complete bullshit. They're making it up. They're taking advantage of this man's death in order to spread hate and fear about Democrats. It's complete and total fucking bullshit, folks. I would like to show some more tweets here. Just some reactions that I found interesting that kind of demonstrate my point. Some more tweets. We already looked at that one. We don't need to see that. That's a conspiracy. Here's a guy, John Rocker. I don't know who John Rocker is. He's just some dude. All Charlie Kirk did was have a respectful dialogue with people he disagreed with. Not exactly true. All Charlie Kirk did was have a disrespectful dialogue with people he disagreed with. Yes, that means he did not deserve to be shot, by the way. I am not happy or celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, but I am telling the truth about who the man was and what he stood for. And the word respectful and Charlie Kirk do not belong in the same sentence. And as proof of that, I've got another tweet here. This is from someone named Whooping Feet. Charlie Kirk said black people were better off in slavery and subjugation before the 1940s. It was bad and it was evil, but they committed less crimes. I don't want to hear y'all tears. Let's listen to the actual words of Charlie Kirk about that, just so that you don't think I'm being disrespectful to the man.
It shows they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad, it was evil, but what happened? Something changed. They committed less crimes.
Maybe they were afraid. I mean, 4,000 black men, women, and children were killed in violent lynch mobs.
That's your explanation, but I guess
racial terror permeated American culture for hundreds of years.
Black America is worse than it has been
that affected
in the last 80 years.
The generational psyche of an entire group of people?
Well, I'm sure it did. I'm not discounting that. I'm just...
You heard it out of the man's mouth. Black people were better when they didn't have rights. You know, black people were better when they were being lynch mobbed. That's what came out of the man's mouth. It's not disrespectful, folks, to tell the truth, no matter what Laura Loomer says to you. Did I make that up? Is that AI or some shit? Did I, doctor that video? No, Charlie Kirk actually said these things. Let's remember who this man actually is. Does that mean that he deserved to be shot and killed? No. But does that mean that we should stand around and let people make up a legacy about him that just isn't true? I don't think so. I think we need to tell the truth about Charlie Kirk. We need to tell the truth so that everybody who talks about him in the next coming days has an accurate picture of who this man actually was. Charlie Kirk was not a hero. One last thing I want to say about all of this, right? How do I personally feel about the death of Charlie Kirk? Okay, because I'm sure some of my viewers are probably wondering, me, myself personally, what's my feelings on the man's death? And, well, I kind of feel the same way about his death that I feel about the death of Rush Limbaugh or Andrew Breitbart. That is to say, when was the last time you thought about either Rush Limbaugh or Andrew Breitbart? I'm willing to bet that even if you're a conservative, you probably haven't really thought about them very much at all within the last decade or so. Ever since both of those men died, you probably haven't really thought about them at all. And you wouldn't be alone, even if you were like a conservative, even if you were a Republican or a MAGA person. You probably have very little in the way of good things or even bad things to say about Andrew Breitbart or Rush Limbaugh. Kind of funny about that, huh? Because when both of those men were alive, they were political powerhouses. Rush Limbaugh had one of the biggest radio shows of all time. Rush Limbaugh kind of invented modern conservative political punditry. He was the first guy to go up and be so super divisive and, spread hate and make millions of dollars doing it. And pretty much every other figure on the right wing owes their careers to Rush Limbaugh. But how often do you hear people talk about Rush Limbaugh? How often do you hear anybody say anything about him at all? Are there documentaries about Rush Limbaugh out there? Are there YouTube videos where people are talking about his legacy, that kind of thing? Not really. Not really. It's not a thing you really see. The same thing with Andrew Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart was one of the big players in the early days of political, commentary online. He had a lot to do with Project Veritas and James O'Keefe and that kind of thing. And, he had a heart attack some time ago, about a decade or so ago, and now you never hear about him again. No one has ever really talked about Andrew Breitbart. He's not a person that you hear a lot about his legacy. And why is that? Why does nobody talk about Andrew Breitbart or Rush Limbaugh? It's because these people were not very well liked, pretty much not at all, because they spent their time spreading hate and fear. And when that's something that you do for a living, people tend to not like you. You tend to not be liked personally. You tend to not have a lot of actual friends who care about you. And I'm getting the feeling that that's probably what's going to happen to Charlie Kirk. I'm seeing right now a lot of divisive and, inflammatory rhetoric coming from especially the right wing out there. But I'm pretty sure that once this news cycle is over and everybody has moved on, which they will in a couple of days, you're probably not going to hear very much about Charlie Kirk at all. There was a school shooting today. Do you think anybody out there is even talking about that in the same context of Charlie Kirk? No. There was a massacre last week. The Republicans took advantage of that too, because the person that actually did that shooting was a trans person. One of the 5 instances of a mass shooting by an actual trans person, which I don't even think there are 5. It's more like there's 3. We can talk about that later. In fact, I did a live stream about that. Are people even talking about that anymore? No. It's because these types of things happen all the time in this country, and the only reason why we're talking about it now is because it was a famous person. In real life, there's gun violence every day in the United States. It's kind of ironic because this is what Charlie Kirk was discussing right before he himself was shot. Right before he himself was shot, Charlie Kirk was debating someone about gun violence. His point was that gun violence was not a big deal. That's what Charlie Kirk was saying. And then suddenly he was shot. That sounds a little ironic to me. But my point in all of this is that, well, I'm pretty sure that once this is all over, Charlie Kirk is going to fade away. And there will be not a lot of discourse about him. He's probably not going to be remembered very well at all. So my opinion, my own personal opinion, is that, well, that's a thing that happened. That's life goes on, right? And that's what happens when you spend your career making money off of fear and hate and violence, is that people forget who you are. And that's what we're going to see with Charlie Kirk. That doesn't mean that he deserved what happened to him. Nobody does. That doesn't mean that people who are out there who are actually celebrating his death, and there are some, are nice people or deserve to get away with it scot-free, of course. That also doesn't mean that the conservatives and Republicans like Donald Trump and Laura Loomer, who are exploiting Charlie Kirk's death, are also not as equally egregious as the people who are celebrating it. One last thing I can finally say here is that this type of gun violence happens all the time in the United States, and Republicans never give a shit. They never care. They never do anything about it, especially when it turns out that the perpetrator of the gun violence happens to be right-wing or conservative in some way. Republicans always like to blame it on mental health and mental illness and all that other stuff. They never want to actually do anything about guns. Guns, which are the actual cause of gun violence, of course, because without guns, there is no gun violence. They never want to do anything about that at all. Well, maybe this will kind of help them to take this issue seriously. Because they don't seem to take it seriously when a maniac dresses up like a cop and shoots Democrats. They don't seem to care about that. They don't seem to take it seriously when an insane person goes into a school and blows away a bunch of children, which tends to happen every week or so in this country. They don't seem to give a shit about that. They don't seem to care when 35,000 people a year are murdered with guns, with handguns in this country. They don't seem to give a shit about that. So maybe they'll finally give a shit when a political pundit who spreads hate and fear and racism is a victim of gun violence. Maybe this will help them understand that, hey, these are real people's lives out there that get murdered every single year by guns. Somehow, though, I doubt it. Somehow, I don't think any Republican out there is going to do shit to try to stop gun violence in this country, because they don't actually care. And that's the final conclusion. They don't actually care about Charlie Kirk. Laura Loomer, Donald Trump, and Nancy Mace, and all the other people out there feigning outrage about his death, they don't actually give a shit about him. Because if they did, they would do something to stop gun violence. But they won't, because they don't actually care. They care about their politics more than their so-called friend. Anyway, I think that's all I got, folks. Stay cool, stay safe, stand up, fight for your rights. Don't let the Republicans boss you around. Don't let them scare and intimidate you. This is the time when you should be standing up for yourself and fighting back and not cowering in the face of creeping, actually not even creeping anymore, full-blown fucking fascism. Stay cool, stay safe, take care of yourself and your family, and I will see you all later. Adios. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.